Good morning, my dear students. Let us continue the fall of Troy. Let us continue. Troy was a strong city, strongly protected by its walls and strongly defended by its brave soldiers. But all the kings and heroes of Greece had declared war against the Trojans. And actually, the Troy, it was a big city, it is a strong city, and it was protected by its walls because the Trojans were made the walls around the Troy city, and that is why it was protected by the walls, and it was also protected by the brave soldiers. But even then, the king and heroes of Greece, they had declared the war against the Troy, Trojans, and because of the Paris. What was the reason? Because of Paris, a prince of Troy had persuaded Helen, wife of a Greek king Menelaus. And why did they declare the war against the Troy? Because a prince of Troy had persuaded Helen, wife of a Greek king Menelaus. That was the reason to elope with him. He had brought her to Troy. The king of Troy had brought the wife of Greek king Menelaus, and that is where they had declared the war against the Troy. The Greeks wanted to take revenge on Troy for the wrong done to Menelaus. Actually, because Troy had done a wrong thing. Troy had done the mischievous thing, and so the Greeks wanted to take a revenge on Troy for the wrong done to Menelaus. It was not the right thing for the Menelaus, and they sailed to Troy and laid siege to the city, and they had declared the war against the Troy, and that is why the Greece they sailed to Troy. They made a voyage to the Troy and laid a siege to the city. They made the round to the city, and the Trojans too fought hard, and the siege continued for 10 long years. So there was the great war between the Greece and the Trojans. When Trojans also fought strongly against the Greece, but even then the siege continued for 10 long years. There was a round around the Troy by the Greece, and it was continued for 10 long years. The fighting went on daily, but the siege did not end. Actually, the war carried on continuously, but there was the siege, the round was not end. On the one hand, the Greeks could not take the city, and on the other hand, the Trojans could not force them to sail away. Actually, there was a fight between the Greeks and the Trojans, and Trojans could not force them to sail away, to send away. And every day the Trojans came out of their gates, and the Greeks came out of their tents, and ships and the fighting went out. So both the side soldiers were coming out of their tents, and they were fighting, and it was continued for long period. Sometimes there were great battles between the two enemies. Sometimes there were single fights between two great heroes. Actually, sometimes there was a great fight between the soldiers, and sometimes there was a fight between the single heroes. Sometimes the Trojans had the better of it, and sometimes the Greeks, but still the fighting went on. Actually, both the sides soldiers was great warriors, and sometimes the Greeks were better than Trojans, and sometimes Trojans were better than Greece. It was happened. Great heroes on both sides were killed in the course of the war after leading the defense of the city for 9 years. It was continued for 9 years, and between the course of the fighting, between the course of the war, many warriors, many soldiers were killed. after leading the defense of the city for 9 years. And the brave Hector was at last killed, and one of the great warrior named Hector, and he was killed by the Achilles warrior, and whom none could resist, and no one could block him. But Achilles himself was killed later on by a poisoned arrow. The Hector was killed. He was a great warrior by the poisoned arrow, and who was killed? By whom he was killed? Achilles. Achilles killed Hector, and after some time, the Achilles also killed with a poisoned arrow. And that poisoned arrow entered his heel. And due to this poisoned arrow entered his heel, he was killed. The only part of his body were where he could be wounded. Still later, Paris himself was killed also by a poisoned arrow. And everyone was a great warrior. And even then, the Hector and the Hectors and the Achilles were killed by the poison arrows. And so after some days, Paris himself was killed also by a poison arrow, and because of the poison arrows, because they were fighting, the war was going on, and from both the sides, the arrows were coming to each other, and these arrows were poison, and because of these poison arrows, the warriors, the soldiers were killed. And one of the greatest examples of the Hector and the Achilles, these were the great warriors, and they killed by the poison arrows. The Trojans were tired of being shut up in their city. Trojans, because they were shut in their city, and due to this shut in their city, they were so tired. Who? The Trojans. And the Greeks also longing to see their homes again. But still the fighting went on. Both the sides, soldiers were tired due to the continuous war, and the Trojans were tired being shut their homes, and the Greeks were also longing to see their homes again, but still the fighting went on. And Greek soldiers were also tired because they wanted to go to their homes and they wanted to see their homes again. But the war was continued, the war was, carried on, the fighting went on. So, this is the part 1, the fall of Troy. And let us continue in the next part 2, the fall of Troy. So, the part 1 is end. Thank you.